Good morning once again. Thank you all for attending today's webinar on the economic injury disaster loan. Today we intend to spend an hour learning about who should apply for economic injury disaster loans, as well as the filing requirements and application process, and the loan terms, including payments, maturity, and collateral. Lastly, we'll learn about the uses of the loan funds and the contact information for any additional information. My name is Antoinette Forbes. I am the Economic Development Manager for the City of St. Cloud. I also serve as the Special Projects Manager, which includes the Community Redevelopment Agency. I want to give you a brief introduction about the Community Redevelopment Agency, also known as the CRA, which was established in May 26 of 2005 with the signing of an interlocal agreement between the city and Osceola County as an independent taxing district established for the purposes of carrying out redevelopment activities that include reducing and eliminating blight, improving the tax base, creating and retaining employment opportunities, and encouraging public and private investments in the CRA. The CRA encompasses an area of slightly over 700 acres, which represents 13% of the city's overall area and includes more or less 1,300 parcels. The CRA is subdivided into three districts, including its own unique character and individually identified vision and goals. While the CRA was established by a local government and functions within that local government, its board includes our 5 city council members plus 2 city citizens. CRAs are a specifically focused tool for redevelopment, and all funds raised during its creation are to maintain within its boundaries. CRAs have shown great success across the state of Florida by increasing property values, attracting new business, and retaining jobs. Today's speaker is Mary Kathy Cook. She's the Public Relations Specialist for the Small Business Administration. She will present on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, also known as the EIDL. The Economic Injury Disaster Loans are working capital loans to help small businesses, small agricultural cooperatives, small businesses engaged in aquaculture, and most private nonprofit organizations of all sizes to help meet their ordinary and necessary financial obligations that cannot be met as a direct result of a disaster. Those loans are intended to assist through the disaster recovery period. All questions are encouraged, and if you should have any during the presentation, feel free to write them in the chat box as we will be addressing them after her presentation. Thank you, and let's begin. Kathy, take it away.
Good morning, St. Cloud. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And I want to express my sympathies for those that have been involved in Hurricane Ian. I know it's been a long road, and here we are at December, and we still have a lot of time for recovery. What I'm going to talk about today is the economic injury loans. And these are different than any other type of loans that SBA has because they deal with something that you can't see. It's the loss of working capital. Next slide, please. So this is specific to having a disaster declaration. You cannot apply for the economic injury disaster loans unless SBA declares a disaster. And the purpose of this is to provide working capital that you need for your business because there was an interruption by a declared disaster, such as Hurricane Ian. And what you can use the funds for would be the same purpose as you would if you had sales, normal sales. So you would use your income from sales to make payments on fixed debts, payroll, any of your accounts payable, your payroll taxes, lease payments, mortgages, inventory, and then also for extraordinary expenses that were caused by the disaster. Let's suppose that you are a clothing retailer and you have all of this product from the summer, but nobody has gone to your shop because the area is devastated and people are not coming to the area where there's a lot of physical damage, there's road closures, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of recovery going on. So you have all this inventory that you wouldn't normally have. You would have sold it. So now you need to purchase the next collection and you still have the old collection. That would be an extraordinary expense, something that you need to pay for that you wouldn't normally have. You wouldn't have both of those seasons on hand. If you had to pay for storage for your product because it didn't sell because of the disaster, that would be another extraordinary expense. Economic injury disaster loans are for working capital to keep the business in business, but they do not provide funds for profits or fund expansions. If you're looking for money to expand your business, consolidate debt, um, change your operation, then these are not the loans for you. Those are traditional small business administration loans that you would get through a bank. Next slide, please. Okay, so the disaster number is important because when you go to the website to apply, you'll need to enter in information about the disaster. So you are applying under 17645. If you had physical damage, it would be 17644. And this, again, is the disaster declaration for Hurricane Ian, which began September 23rd and is continuing. You have until June 29, 2023 to apply. And that seems like a long time. However, you don't have to wait till June. As soon as you realize that you have working capital needs, apply. And we'll talk about how to make sure that you have enough money to take you through to the recovery period ends. Next slide, please. Okay, so almost any type of business can apply for an economic injury. I am in Atlanta, and I know I've been to Florida a bunch of times, tend to be a tourist state, so there's a lot of tourist type businesses, souvenir shops and hotels. There's marinas, there's boats that do fishing, there's boats that you can charter, a lot of good restaurants, there's travel agencies. All of these types of businesses are eligible, as well as traditional businesses that are not tourist related. You know, grocery stores, gas station, any type of retailer, just about any type of business at all. And what the criteria is, the first criteria to get a loan is eligibility. And to be eligible, the business has to have a physical presence in a declared disaster area, in a declared county. So if you write your application and you put for the address P.O. Box and it's in St. Cloud, that is not going to make you eligible. A P.O. box does not give the business physical presence. You actually have to have some office, something tangible in the disaster area. Next slide, please. All right, so the first process is to figure out what does it take for me to get a loan approval? 3 things. Eligibility. Got to be your business in the declared county. So we've heard that twice. Now you have to have satisfactory credit. It doesn't mean perfect credit, it means satisfactory. We will review the credit bureau report and decide whether or not you are credit worthy. And then you have to have repayment ability. What that means is we have to look at your financial information, income, look at your debts, and determine that there is still money left over after you pay your expenses and debts to afford a loan payment. We are going to look at your historical sales. If you've had some situations such as COVID that has interrupted your sales, then we need to make a notation, and we are going to look for historical financial information that would be representative of a normal year. SBA disaster loans are for people who cannot make it on their own. You don't have, the savings to take care of the loss of working capital. You don't have business interruption insurance. And we are cash flow lenders. That means that it's more important to us to be able to show on paper that, or in the computer rather, that you can afford to repay the loan and the existing debts. We are not collateral lenders, which means when you go to a bank might go and look at the value of your building. If your building is worth $1 million, but you owe $900,000 on it, then they might only be willing to give you $100,000 at most for a loan. SBA is more concerned with your ability to repay, and we're not judging you on how much equity you have or what type of collateral you have. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of benefits within the program. These are low interest rate loans, and we can stretch the loan out as far as 30 years to help make it affordable. Some people have gotten emergency loans or interim loans. In Florida, they're called bridge loans, to tide them over until they can get other financing, such as an SBA disaster loan. And you can borrow as much as $25,000 without pledging collateral. The loans can be as much as $2 million. But if you've never had $2 million worth of sales, then we're not going to lend you the maximum. We're going to look at your financial history. We're going to look at your sales and your expenses, your fixed debts, and see what the business needs. The actual loan amount is determined by us. And why I say that is you can ask for a loan for $100,000, but we are going to look at the historical sales, the fixed debts, the expenses, and determine how long we think that you are going to experience some economic injury and determine what you need to keep going. Remember, these are working capital loans to keep the business in business. If you're approved and you're a for-profit business, then the interest rate will be 3.04%. If you're a nonprofit, it will be 1.875%. The interest rate does not change over the life of the loan. Next slide, please. So the process begins with, first, you must apply. And you can apply online at disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA, or you can visit one of the SBA Business Recovery Centers, or you can go to a FEMA Disaster Recovery Centers. SBA sits side by side with FEMA at any disaster recovery center. The disaster recovery centers are a little more geared toward homeowners and renters than they are businesses. So that's why SBA establishes a business recovery center, so that businesses don't have to wait in the lines with all the individuals trying to get help for their personal property and their residents. You can also submit an application by mail. So there's 3 ways. You can go online, which is preferred. Why is it preferred? Because you are entering the information. So it doesn't have to be transcribed from paper, which sometimes causes errors, misspellings. You know, a lot of people, when they write applications, I can't read their writing. Another reason that we prefer online is it goes directly from the computer you use to apply to our computer. So that makes it faster, more efficient. But don't let that dissuade you. If you don't have a computer or you prefer to apply on a paper loan application and mail it in, you certainly can do that. You also can fill out a paper loan application, and while the business recovery centers and disaster recovery centers are still open, you can submit the paper application directly to the SBA staff there. Next slide, please. It generally takes 2 to 3 weeks to get a loan decision. If you are approved, then we are going to send some loan closing documents to you. And it's not until you sign those documents and send them back that you're eligible for a disbursement. If you are not approved, then we will give you appeal rights. If you're declined for, let's say, unsatisfactory credit or lack of repayment ability, and let's take an unsatisfactory credit situation. One reason I can tell you that we would say you have unsatisfactory credit is if you're showing child support payments that are delinquent more than 60 days. If you had a federal loan and it was in default or delinquent, those are some things that will cause credit to be unsatisfactory. The decline letter would say that you're not approved because of unsatisfactory credit, and it'll give you 6 months from the date of that letter in which to appeal. When you appeal, that means that you'll write a letter saying, here's proof that was an error on my credit report. My child support payments are current. And you'll submit whatever paperwork that the letter requests, and then we will give the loan application to another loan officer, and you'll get a second shot at it. So don't let a decline letter stop you, because you do have appeal processes, and you have up to 6 months. So you can work with our partners with the Small Business Development Centers and SCORE and other people to help prepare documents that would help you get a loan when you ask for reconsideration. Next slide, please. So we've approved your loan. Everything's good. Eligibility, you're in a declared county. Physically have a presence there. And you have satisfactory credit, and we show that you can afford to repay the loan. Then the legal department is going to prepare loan closing documents such as a promissory note, loan authorization agreement. If you are in a flood zone, then you would have flood insurance to purchase. If we took collateral, then there would be mortgage document. When you execute these documents and send them back in, then the attorney reviews it and they can order a disbursement. Sometimes the disbursement is all at once. Sometimes, because of the documents that you've returned, we can only disperse as much as the unsecured amount. So you may get a check for $25,000 first, and then when you submit the rest of your loan closing documents, you would get the rest of the funds. We have to take collateral by law if the loan is over $25,000. But if you don't own collateral, and when they put this on there, they mean if you don't own real estate, then we will take whatever assets are available. Machinery and equipment, inventory, accounts receivable. But if you say, I'm not willing to let you put a mortgage on my building, I just paid the mortgage off, then you have limited yourself to a $25,000 or less loan. And it's totally your choice. But if you don't pledge collateral, then we can't make the loan for the full value if it's over the $25,000. Next slide, please. As we said up front, you can be a small business, a small agricultural cooperative, a small aquaculture business, or a private nonprofit. Let me explain what a private nonprofit means. In addition to homeowners and businesses having damage from Ian, the government has damages. There's damages to police department, city hall, all the different things that the city is responsible for. SBA does not make loans to governments, so FEMA helps with that. But a private nonprofit means everything other than a government. So that's what a private nonprofit means. Now, we say small businesses. A business is classified by the North American Industrial Classification Code. Every business has a code and is by type of business. And when you go to the SBA website, you look at that code, and then you'll look at what's called a size standard. A size standard is the maximum number of employees or the maximum amount of revenue a particular type of business can have and still be considered a small business. The reason for that is we try to give businesses that are small advantages in getting government contracts. So for an economic injury loan, you have to qualify as a small business. But there isn't any size standard for nonprofit organizations. So they don't have to go through a size standard. We want to make sure that you're a business that was affected by the disaster. This is not an opportunity to get working capital for future endeavors. This is because you were in Hurricane Ian and you have experienced a business interruption. So we want to make sure that you get the advantage of having a low interest loan for working capital. You can be a business that had physical damage. Okay, you were, let's say, a fishing boat, and the boat is destroyed. Then it goes without saying, you are economically injured. So you have been directly affected by the disaster. Let's say that you are a packing house, and what you do is you get the fish from the fishermen and you pack the fish to sell to restaurants and grocers and all types of businesses. But you did not have any physical damage. You are interrupted because the fisherman's boat is destroyed. The fisherman is not able to fish anymore because of all the debris. Maybe the Fish and Wildlife prohibited fishing for a certain period after. So you are also affected because you do business with a business that is directly impacted. Then we've got the third scenario where the business is indirectly related to the industry. And that could be a frozen food company that gets the fish from the packing house. You are affected because you're in that chain. You could be the grocer that carries the fish, and you're in that supply chain. So there's all ways to have economic injury that are associated to the disaster, but you don't have to be directly affected. I have another scenario. Let's say that you're in one of the declared counties, and what you do is you sell and service linens. You give tablecloths and sheets and pillowcases and all that to the local hotels, restaurants, and they switch out the supplies once a year because they get wear and tear. So in October of every year, this is what you do. You go to St. Cloud and you visit all the restaurants that need your tablecloths and napkins and supplies and hotels, etc. But now you find out that all these hotels and these restaurants have been physically damaged, or they're economically damaged because nobody wants to go to a restaurant and sit and look at the debris. So you can be impacted, but you might not know it for several months because you only sell or you only provide the new linens once a year. So that's another way, indirectly, a business can be involved. Next slide, please. All right, so we know you got to be a small business, you have to be in a declared disaster area, and suffered substantial economic injury. If you are out of operation for one day, traditionally a business should have enough revenue to take you through the one day, maybe even 2 or 3 days or up to a week. But let's suppose that that one day is the day of a festival, and that one day you do 90% of your whole annual sales. Then that one day would be a day where you've suffered substantial economic injury. So it's just a matter of us reviewing what kind of business you have and how your operation, how your sales and operation are as far as any seasonality, any time of the year that it's better than other times of the year. So those are types of things that would be helpful to identify. When we're talking about economic injury, we're saying, hey, I need help. I can't pay my bills in the way that I would have normally. I want to, but I've had a business interruption. So that's what economic injury is. And we try to lend you enough money to take you through the recovery period. In other words, until things normalize. We don't have a crystal ball. You don't have a crystal ball. So we don't exactly know when that's going to happen. But we are going to work with you and project it. And there's always opportunities to ask for an increase if the economic injury continues beyond the period of time that we have projected and you need more funds. Next slide, please. We're a little different than the traditional Small Business Administration. The traditional Small Business Administration is the agency that you know, that you come to and you say, hey, I would like to start a business. Can you help me? Can you finance my operation? And typically we will send you to a bank and you would apply for a loan that's guaranteed by SBA. SBA disaster loans are totally different. You apply directly to SBA and the funds come from the Treasury. So there's no bank involved. There's no cost to apply. The only cost there is the time it takes to complete the application and submit all the information. Let's say that you apply and we decide that you qualify and we offer you a loan for $50,000. You're like, oh, I just don't know. I don't know what to do. I was thinking about retiring. Well, you can decide that you're not ready. You don't want that. And you can say cancel the loan, and we'll give you up to 6 months to ask for reinstatement. We may ask you for current financial information because time has passed in that 6 months, but you don't have to take the loan if we approve it. You can take all, some, or none. Some people have a COVID loan, a COVID economic injury disaster loan. Some people have loans from Hurricane Michael. You can have any number of disaster loans, but they cannot be consolidated. They come out of different obligations, appropriations, and they're different interest rates, so they cannot be consolidated. However, if you have an existing disaster loan and you're applying for this economic injury disaster loan, and you would have trouble paying the previous disaster loan, talk to your servicing office. They can sometimes lower your payment. They can defer the payment. They can make some alterations to make both loans affordable. Next slide, please. All right, so here are the filing requirements. This is the thing that you need to know. I would go, if I were you, onto the SBA's website and download the paper version of the loan application. That way you know exactly what information is required, what questions we ask, and you'll be ready when you apply online. So you need to complete the loan application itself. You must, and I can't stress this enough, you must submit a tax information authorization form. If you do not submit this form, your application will go nowhere. And it's not just you that has to fill out this IRS form. It has to be the applicant business, the principals, and affiliates. So if you are a corporation, you need one for the applicant, Kathy Cook, Florist Incorporated. Kathy Cook has the corporation and she owns 50% and her brother owns 50%. That's two principals. So I personally must fill out one of the tax information authorizations, and my brother also must fill out a tax information authorization. And let's say my brother owns a corporation with his wife, then that's an affiliate. He must fill out a tax information authorization on that other business. We can't work without it. All right, schedule of liabilities tells us what you have to pay each month. And you can't necessarily find all this on a balance sheet because all the expenses or your payables are lumped together. So schedule of liabilities is very helpful. Personal financial statement is something that is completed by the principals. So in my scenario, that would be one for me and one for my brother. Next slide, please. Okay, it's very hard to read, but in the application itself, there are 6 or 7 pages, and on the back page of the application package are the filing requirements. So before you submit your application, look at these things and make sure that you have everything. In addition to submitting a tax information authorization, we require that you submit the most recent complete copy of your federal tax return. That's for the applicant business. So there are several things that you want to check. The biggest reason for delay in processing is because we don't have all the information we need, or you have some things that don't make sense. what I'm saying is maybe all of a sudden when we look at your historical sales, they bumped up last year and you did more revenue than ever. But maybe that occurred because you purchased a second component of a business. And so you've expanded, and that's the reason. All these kinds of things that you know that we don't know can be explained on the back page of the application. There's a big blank space, even online. And so that's where you can say, I applied for a COVID loan. I received this much money and I applied in 2021 or 2022. Or uh, I expanded. I have a restaurant and I expanded the capacity for seating in 2019. Normally we had 20 tables, now we have 50. Or the reverse. We closed off part of the restaurant and sold it off to a souvenir shop. And so now we have, instead of 50 tables, we have an intimate number 20. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what the application looks like itself. The only reason I'm showing you this is there are actually two different types of loan applications. There's this one that says Disaster Business Loan Application. That's an SBA Form 5. Next slide, please. And there's a front side, a back side. There's a bunch of questions. Ask you if you've ever filed bankruptcy, if you have any judgments against you, if you have defaulted on federal debt, if you have any criminal background, different questions like that. Make sure that you answer everything. Next slide, please. Okay, the second type of business loan application is a simpler application, and it's designed for a homeowner, renter, or sole proprietor. So if you're a sole proprietor, you want to select this type of application, and on it, you need to make sure that it asks you what you're applying for, physical or economic or both. And so if you're just applying for economic, make sure to select that box. Next slide, please. All right, this is what that tax transcript request looks like. It's an IRS form. Make sure, I can't stress enough, make sure that you have the number of forms to suit your business structure. And make sure that you pay attention to above the signature, you check the right box. If your name on your tax return is Thomas J. Waters, make sure that you put Thomas J. Waters on this. The IRS checks for everything. If you're applying with a spouse and Thomas J. Waters is listed first on the tax return that you submit, and then Kathy Cook is second, then that's the order you should put it on the form. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a personal financial situation statement, and I know they're very difficult to see, but essentially it's a balance sheet. It's what you own, what you owe, and the difference is your net worth. And in the sections that are blue, it tells you exactly what to put. Next slide, please. Schedule of liabilities, again, that's your creditors. A lot of things are on the credit bureau, but not everything. So if you have, let's say you bought the tables and chairs for your restaurant from a wholesaler and you pay them, then we need to know how much you borrowed, what the current balance is, how much you pay a month, and is it secured by something? You know, same thing. Kathy Cook, Florist Incorporated, I have a van, delivery van. So how is the loan secured? It's secured with the van itself. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we may request, and we will request a lot of times, at least 1 year of federal tax return complete copy for the applicant business, but sometimes we need it for the principals. We need it for a general partner if it's a partnership. If you're an LLC, LLP, LLE, then the managing member must submit the tax return. And we need it for affiliates. So we're looking for that. We are going to look at all the resources that we can to use for the proof of the income and statements on the debts to be able to figure out what it is that you need for future capital. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is probably the most critical. Put your sales for at least the last 3 years on here, so that we can tell what you normally do and what you're expecting to do. Your estimated sales. If you have to go back another year because everything was not normal because of COVID, then do so. Next slide, please. All right. If you pay somebody, an accountant, CPA, to submit the application for you, then we want to know how much they charged. It is not necessary for you to hire somebody to do this. SBA has resources you can go to for free. Next slide, please. Okay, there are a few types of businesses that are not eligible for economic injury. And the one that would probably be the most common would be religious organizations. If you are a church and you had physical damage, or your parochial school, then you can get a loan for the physical damages. But by law, you can't for economic injury. Next slide, please. All right, so this is what it looks like when you're going to apply online. And you're simply going to go to that website, disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA, and click the red button, Apply. Next slide. You're going to have to accept the terms and conditions, just like almost any computer program. Next slide. And you are going to have to create your own account under login.gov. Make sure that you keep this password somewhere where you can get to it, because we do not know the password. We cannot get it for you. And it is a way to safeguard your information in the system. So make sure that you create something that you will remember when you first log in, and the system is going to authenticate you. Next slide. All right, so once it goes through the login.gov, then you're going to say, I need to apply for a disaster loan, and you will actually start the loan application. Next slide, please. All right, the COVID situation. We operate different than the COVID loans. The COVID loans were approved for a unique type of processing. You did not have to provide any financial documentation. It was relatively simple. You answered about 15 or 20 questions and submitted the application. That's not how traditional disaster loans for economic injury work. So you got to put all that out the window, and you have to follow the instructions on the economic injury disaster loan application. We're going to require personal guarantees in a lot of cases and require collateral in excess of $25,000. Next slide, please. Okay, what can you use the money for? As we said in the beginning, it is to keep your business in business. So if things were normal, what would you use your revenue for? Payroll, lease payments, utilities, payroll taxes, maybe real estate taxes, payments on your credit cards, whatever it is. But you cannot use the funds to expand the business, to consolidate debt, to make things better. It's just to stabilize you. These are disaster loans, and by law, they cannot be forgiven. We have somebody almost every week ask for that. And throughout a 30-year loan, it comes up periodically. People are tired of paying the loan every month or what have you. You can pay it off early, no prepayment penalty, but it can't be forgiven. You can have as many disaster loans as necessary, but again, they cannot be consolidated. Next slide, please. You cannot use this loan to pay off a COVID loan. Okay, you can't use government loan to pay off a government loan. So if you have a situation that you are unsure of, when you talk to your loan officer, ask them, say, this is what I would want to do with this money, and see if it is an eligible use of proceeds or not. You want to comply with the way that the program is written. Next slide, please. Okay, I think we've covered most of this. Let's go forward one more. Okay, if you want to mail in your application, there's going to be an address on the application itself. But again, it's preferred that you apply online. It's more accurate and it's quicker. Next slide, please. All right, these are our partners. If you look at the icons at the bottom, the Women's Business Center, the Veterans Business Outreach Center, SCORE, and America's Small Business Development Center. They're located in local colleges and universities. They can put your package together for free. They can help you apply online. If you don't know how to prepare profit and loss, if you don't know how to figure out what your monthly sales are, if you don't know any of the accounting part of your business, bring your paperwork to the Small Business Development Center and they will help you at no cost. Next slide, please. I think I've covered this too. You have until June 29th, 2023, but don't delay. The sooner the better. Next slide, please. All right, and this is our contact information. We're always just a phone call away. So if you have any questions, you can call 800-659-2955 or simply send us an email at disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. I appreciate your time. Hopefully, you know a little more about economic injury disaster loans than you did before. Please, if you've attended, think about your fellow businesses. Your vendors may have economic injury. Your neighboring businesses may have economic injury. Share the information. This is an opportunity that's not always available. When there's a disaster, there has to be a disaster declaration. And these loans can help save a business. And with that, I will turn it back over. If there's any questions, then we will entertain those. And I appreciate your time and attention today.
Thank you so much, Kathy. You gave us a lot of information, and we do have a couple of questions in the chat box. One of the questions is in reference to a business eligibility to apply for the loan. the economic injury loan if they were opened just before the disaster occurred. Therefore,
Absolutely.
to examine.
Absolutely. Yeah. In those cases, a lot of times you have to give projections. And if you just started a business, but you purchased a business, let's say I had a lady who owned a hair salon, but she'd been working for as a hairdresser for years, and she just finally bought her own shop. Well, she had records from the previous owner to show. Sometimes a business owner has borrowed from a bank to start that business and had to provide financial statements on projecting what the sales would be for the new business and show that they're in line with other types of businesses in the same industry. So we're not going to penalize you because you just happened to start before the hurricane.
Another question is in reference to the time frame after they have submitted their application and when they could expect to receive funds.
Okay. The reason I didn't have that on the slide is because it's dependent upon you. Generally 2 to 3 weeks to get a loan decision. And then we're going to send you the loan closing documents. When are you going to sign those and send them back? Well, you might have a mortgage that you have to record. You might have a document that you have to take to your insurance company. You might be out of town. You might have a partner that's not available. So I can't tell you how long it takes to get the money because I don't know when you're submitting the documents. What I can tell you is once you've submitted the loan closing documents, and if everything's okay, once the attorney reviews it, then it takes 3 to 5 days to get dispersed and put in your bank account. So it's not 3 to 5 days from the date of approval. It's not 3 to 5 days when we send you the documents. It's once you send them back in and we review them. Thank you for that question.
Sure. We have another question. Are these loans reported to the credit bureaus?
I have not heard that unless there's a default situation that we report it to the credit bureau. If you want us to report it, like you need to have something on your credit report and you don't have any other credit that you are paying, then we can. But if you default, it's going on there. And when we pull credit, it's what's called a hard pull. So it will reflect that SBA pulled a credit bureau report. And that's the information as I know it. I am not in a servicing department, so I'm telling you the last time I had heard about if it was reported or not.
The other question would be, how does this read here? Can other non-SBA grant or loan funds be used to pay off the disaster loans?
You can pay off the disaster loan with any funds that you have. There's no prepayment penalty.
Perfect. And then the last question, which I think I can answer, which is, what if we have questions when completing the application? Who should the applicant call? I believe you referenced the local SBDC consultant, which in this case would be Raphael Pratt. I put his contact information in the chat box. He's available at rpratts, plural, at ucf.edu. His phone number is 407-847-2458. I believe, as you mentioned, they can assist applicants in completing the documentation in its entirety, which I think will take a load off. And then lastly, I just want to mention that we have recorded this webinar and we'll provide it to all registrants. So if you have any questions or like to go back, that should be available to all registrants within the next the next few days. I once again want to thank our presenter, Ms. Kathy Cook from the SBA, as well as our attendees for presenting. I hope that everyone has a great remainder of their day.